The fact that Marvel had the world premiere on the same day that Jonathan Majors released that Ebony magazine Valentine's Day photo shoot, and this movie didn't have not one shirtless scene of Kang the Conqueror, throw the whole movie away. And welcome to my safe haven, everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining me for another review here on the Black Gay Comic Geek channel and just joining me on the channel in general. I actually just realized yesterday that February 12th, which was 2 days ago, which happy Valentine's Day, by the way, but 2 days ago, February 12th, 2023, was my 4-year anniversary since posting YouTube videos. So happy anniversary to me, and thank you guys so much for rocking with me and this channel, whether you've been here for the entire 4 years or you just got here a month ago. I have just also recently, in that 4 years, hit 7,400 subscribers. I'm 100 subscribers away from hitting 7,500 subscribers. So thank you so much. So with that said, if this is your first time checking me out and you're one of my new subscribers, first of all, thank you. And let me introduce myself. My name is Michael. I call myself the Black Gay Comic Geek. And I always say the things that I love to talk about on my channel has blood, sex, gore, and magic, or any variation of the four. So I like to talk superheroes, video games, comic books, action movies, sci-fi movies, horror movies, animated movies, and of course I like to talk about black representation and queer representation. So if that's something that you find important and you're interested in, you would appreciate the fact that there is a black queer movie reviewer, black queer nerd in this space that is saturated by straight nerds, especially straight white nerds. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, become one of my safe Gaveneers. Let me get to 7,500 subscribers. But whether you're a new person, regular person, you already know what I'm gonna say. Please, 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 if you are coming across this video, please hit the like button. I can't emphasize enough how important that is. It tells YouTube that this video is worth getting out there. It'll recommend it to other people so other people could check out the channel and then maybe subscribe to the channel. And that's how my channel can continue to grow. It's all up to you. Hitting the like button, watching this video to the end for the watch time, because YouTube loves watch time. Watch time is king. Watch, like, share, comment, interact on this video for the all gay rhythm. Now that I got all of that house cleaning out of the way, guys, we are here to talk about the latest movie from the MCU, the first movie of Phase 5, and that is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Obviously, this is going to be a non-spoiler review because the movie officially comes out on February 17th, which is Friday. I want to say once again, thank you to Marvel and Disney for allowing me the opportunity to go to the red carpet world premiere in LA last week. Had a great time. Thank you so much for that opportunity. Like, the opportunities that I've gotten lately, like, are just amazing. And I couldn't have had it without you guys subscribing to my channel. So thank you, thank you, thank you so much. It's because of you that I have got the opportunity to be able to go to these premieres or get screeners or anything of the sort. But anyway, with that said, being that this movie is the kickoff to Phase 5, is it a good kickoff? Is it the best movie of the trilogy? How is this movie in terms of the rest of the Ant-Man movies? Let's talk about it. So the synopsis for Ant-Man and the Wasp is Ant-Man and the Wasp, Janet, Hank, his daughter, Cassie, they all find themselves exploring the quantum realm, interacting with strange new creatures, and embarking on an adventure that pushes them beyond the limits of what they thought was possible. And so yeah, like I mentioned, obviously with the movie being Ant-Man, the movie starring Paul Rudd. The movie also stars Evangeline Lilly returning back as Wasp. You have newcomer Catherine Newton, who's playing his daughter, Cassie Lang. You also have Michael Douglas returning as Hank Pym. You have Bill Murray playing a brand new character named Lord Krylar. And you also have the great, the sexy, the powerful Jonathan Majors playing Kang the Conqueror, the villain of this movie. Little flex, just wanted to do that. But anyway, getting into the movie, like this movie, the majority of this movie takes place in the quantum realm, and it is a realm that we've never really seen before, especially in this scope in the MCU. So you're definitely exploring a new part of the universe. And so with that, like the scale of this movie is definitely much grander than any of the Ant-Man movies previously, because prior, like the Ant-Man movies for the most part have been pretty grounded. Like the first one was basically just a heist movie. The second one was kind of like it still took place on Earth. It was kind of a heist movie. There wasn't anything, like they weren't fighting any aliens or anything like that. But this movie, like, it's a completely different world, a completely different universe, and it's very, in many ways, Star Warsian in its scope. Like, it definitely reminds me of Star Wars. Like, there's moments that it's like, it looks like it takes place on Coruscant, and there's almost like moments where it seems like there's a cantina moment in this movie. And so with that, like I said, it's very different from anything that you've seen before, particularly in an Ant-Man movie. And then also there are some visually interesting and fun characters that you come across in the quantum realm. And speaking of getting to explore more, in this movie you get to explore more of the character of Janet Van Dyne and find out what was her life like when she was trapped in the quantum realm for all these years. You get to know more of her as a character, because for the most part, you didn't really get much from Janet Van Dyne, because if I remember correctly, she didn't show up until the end of Ant-Man 2. And then sadly, she just gets out the quantum realm, and then she pretty much instantly gets blipped right after that. So Janet hasn't had a good time this whole time in the MCU for the most part. And so I really enjoyed Michelle Pfeiffer in this movie. Like, she is probably my second favorite character in this movie. Like, she was great, and I really enjoyed watching her and her dynamic with her family, and with, of course, my favorite character in this movie, Jonathan Majors as Kang the Conqueror. Because obviously if she's in the quantum realm and Kang is in the quantum realm, you know they definitely had to cross paths at a certain point. And going into that, like, Jonathan Majors, like I said, he is my favorite character in this entire movie. And every time he is on screen, he is menacing, he is intriguing, he is sexy without even meaning to be sexy. Like, I loved his introduction, not his introduction, because the first time we saw him was in the season finale of Loki, but he was a different version of Kang. He technically wasn't even Kang, he was He Who Remains. But this time we are finally getting our introduction into one of the major variants of Kang the Conqueror. And this was a great introduction to me, is him as Kang. He was definitely menacing. I loved every time he was on screen, he just made the movie that much better for it. However though, and unfortunately, despite all of that, despite really liking Jonathan Majors, despite really liking Michelle Pfeiffer, and even getting to see Cassie Lang, you know, come into her own as a superhero, and we definitely know that obviously leading up to the Young Avengers, and Cassie Lang was one of the founding members of the Young Avengers. Like, despite all of that, and despite my excitement, because I've been calling and hoping for the Young Avengers for years, but despite all of that, like, this movie wasn't that great. Now, with that said, that doesn't mean the movie was bad. I would say ultimately the movie was okay. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, like, at this point, we're like 25 or so movies into the MCU. And like, I feel like at this point, like, enough with the random jokes inserted throughout the movie. Like, I was expecting this movie to be way darker than it ended up being. And it's fine if a movie is different than what I expected it to be, but at the same time, the standard typical MCU jokes, like, a lot of the jokes just did not land for me in this movie, and they were completely unnecessary. And a lot of that even had to do with, like, how this movie started. Like, in the beginning, it started like in this way. They were trying to give it this little cutesy, hopeful, you know, what's the word I'm trying to use? They're trying to make it seem like, obviously, before they get to the quantum realm, that Scott has this completely perfect life. And it was like joke after joke after joke. And like, a lot of it just wasn't like, the beginning of this movie was just was paced, like, it was very slow until you really get to the quantum realm. And so, like, that's when the movie really starts to kick off. The second and third half, like, the first half of this movie, it wasn't bad, but it was just like, okay, let's let's move on at this point. Like, and then also, like, I wasn't really connecting, especially considering, like, this movie is called Ant-Man and the Wasp. Janet didn't really have much to do in this movie. Or not Janet, sorry. Hope didn't really have much to do in this movie. Like, honestly, it was more Janet than it was Hope. Like, this movie should have been called Ant-Man and Janet, who I guess technically she was Wasp, but she wasn't Wasp in this movie. And then also, like, overall, most of the CGI looked pretty good in this movie, but there were some sequences and some moments where, like, the CGI just looked really bad. Like, PlayStation 2 levels of bad. Like, because obviously we know Cassie has powers now, and I'm thinking about that scene specifically where she shrinks and she's running as a shrunken person. I was like, yeah, this looks terrible. And then also the thing that I dislike the most regarding this movie, and it's not a spoiler because he's in the trailers and the promotional material, but I do not like what they did with the character of MODOK. And for those of you that don't know, MODOK is an acronym for Mechanized Organism Designed Only for Killing. And like, again, going into the MCU jokes, like a lot of the things that they did with his character was completely unnecessary. And then what happened to the character at the end, like, a lot of it, I was just like, this is stupid. I hate all of this. Like, again, I was like, this movie should have been way darker than it was. Like, especially considering this was the introduction of Kang the Conqueror. This is the first movie in the not the MCU, but this is the first movie in MCU Phase 5. Like, it should have started with a bang. And I don't mean dark in the sense of like this movie should have been rated R. No, I don't mean that. I just mean the tone. Like, this almost kind of felt like a Saturday morning cartoon. Like, to be perfectly honest, if it wasn't for both Jonathan Majors and Michelle Pfeiffer's Kang and Janet, this movie would have been way worse than it was. Like, Jonathan Majors honestly really saved this movie for me. And that's not to say like Paul Rudd wasn't good. Like, I appreciate Paul Rudd as Ant-Man and things like that, but like, I wanted more from this movie. But with that said, that doesn't mean, like I said, this movie wasn't terrible. And also, like, I really enjoyed this movie more than Ant-Man and the Wasp, like Ant-Man 2. So I would say like, but I would say for me, like, Ant-Man is #1 in terms of the best of the trilogy, then Quantumania, and then Ant-Man and the Wasp. And then also with this movie being the third movie of a trilogy, like, this movie doesn't feel like the third movie of a trilogy. This doesn't feel like, because I don't know if there's going to be another Ant-Man movie, but it doesn't feel like it's wrapping up these characters. Like I mentioned, like Janet, or I keep trying to say Janet, but because Janet is Wasp in the comics, Hope is somebody they made up. But Hope really, like I said, for this to be called Ant-Man and the Wasp, you didn't really get anything really from Hope's character or to like justify her being in the title of the movie. She barely did anything. And I mean, if I were to go back to my old rankings for this movie, I would say this movie is a breaking even, or maybe like a high breaking even. It was like, this movie was meh. My only reason for recommending, or my strongest reason for recommending this movie, is because of Kang the Conqueror. It is because of Jonathan Majors and his performance. And not only just that, but like, also the greatest things about this movie are the 2 post-credit scenes that happen at the end. Now, I will say, those post-credit scenes, 2 of them, really had me hype for what's coming forward, and hopefully those don't disappoint me. And usually what happens, like especially lately, is like there'll be like one good post-credit scene or one relevant post-credit scene, and then a second one that's just like, it gives you more of the world, but it's not really consequential to what's coming. But no, in this movie, both post-credit scenes are consequential to the MCU, and I was like, oh, let's go. I am excited. But that's if they allow the MCU to be done. And I will say, like, going into like, you know, like the DC slate that was announced with James Gunn and things like, and I mentioned this before, this is one thing that I will say, despite the turmoil that the DCEU has had, I will say, like, hopefully under the reign of James Gunn and Peter Safran, one thing that DC can have that will cause them to rapidly dwarf the MCU, despite the MCU being around much longer, is the DCEU, or now DC Studios, especially under James Gunn, or even before James Gunn, the DCEU is willing to take way much more risks with their properties and with their characters than Marvel is. Because like I mentioned, this movie should have been much darker. And again, not rated R, but much darker in tone than it was. But it seems like the Marvel Cinematic Universe is still trying to live in that Joss Whedon quip Avengers land. And it's like, we don't have to do this anymore. Like, you've proven yourself with 25 or whatever, how many movies. Like, you can shift the tone in these movies. Or I even think about something like Blade and how Kevin Feige was like, we're not going to do a rated R Blade movie. It's still going to be PG-13. And it's like, but why though? Like, you can do a rated R movie. You can do a PG-13 movie. You can do a horror movie. Because I remember, I think part of the reason Scott Derrickson left Multiverse of Madness, Doctor Strange 2, is he wanted to make it much more horror-esque than he was allowed to. But then you get on the flip side, something like James Gunn, they talk about how Swamp Thing is going to be a straight horror movie. They had no problems doing a rated R, The Suicide Squad, or something like a Peacemaker, which was rated R. So they have no problems in changing the tones of certain properties because certain characters lend towards a more rated R. Like for a solo Wolverine movie, if we get a solo rated Wolverine movie, I don't want it to be PG-13. I want it to be rated R, just like Deadpool, which they're saying they're allowing Deadpool to be rated R, so why can't Blade also be rated R? Or like even something like a Moon Knight I go back to on Disney Plus. Like they talked about how, you know, with Moon Knight and how now we got like Daredevil, the Netflix Marvel movies on Disney Plus. And so you have a TV MA section on Disney Plus. I thought because of that, that meant Moon Knight, especially all the talk about how Moon Knight was going to be one of the darkest MCU properties that they ever did. And then you watch Moon Knight and it wasn't really that dark. Like a lot of the scenes and the brutality, and not to say everything has to be completely rated R, but a lot of the darkness they cut away from. And so, I don't know, it's just, that's the thing that disappointed me the most, especially with this being the introduction of the biggest baddie. He's a bigger baddie than Kang the Conqueror. Or he's a bigger baddie than Thanos. And like I said, this movie felt like a Saturday morning cartoon. But anyway, that's enough of my rant. Like I said, I thought the movie was meh. It was okay. Jonathan Majors and Michelle Pfeiffer are the ones that really saved the movie for me, and the 2 post-credit scenes at the end. But with that said, after you've seen Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, let me know, come back to this video and let me know what did you think about it, because there are people that might love it, there are people that might hate it, there are people that might think it's okay. So let me know where you land, and let me know also in the comment section below, after you see the movie, where does this movie land in terms of the Ant-Man trilogy? Let me know all of your thoughts. Also, hopefully you made it to the end of this video for the watch time. Also, if you can, hit the like button on this video to help with the YouTube algorithm. Also, if this is your first time checking out one of my videos, please check out the other videos on my channel. If you like what you see, please subscribe for more and hit that bell notification button so you're alerted every single time I post a new video. And tell your friends, families, and neighbors about my channel to help me continue to grow. And as always, I will catch you guys next time.